Okay, welcome to MTO Sociology. This is a video on something I call the essay flowchart method, and it's all to do with writing under pressure. Now, how many times have you been in a mock exam or even in a regular lesson and your teacher or me has put an essay in front of you and you've just gone blank, or you've just crumbled under pressure, or you've just thought, I have no clue how to answer this? I see it quite a lot. And I hear it quite a lot from other teachers and other students. It's something which can cost you grades, and it's something which I hope this will help you work around and give you some coping mechanisms and some ideas and strategies for those essays that just seem way too hard. So the essay I picked was one we attempted recently, and it was very, very popular when students were given a free choice. And it was discuss how far sociologists would agree that working class males are most likely to commit crime because of status frustration. Now, you may already spotted that I've bugged this. We've crossed out discuss how far sociologists would agree, because every essay asks you that. That's obvious, that's the starting point, we don't need that. And I've highlighted working class males and because of status frustration. We know this is going to appear in the crime section, so that's irrelevant for now. It's the working class males and status frustration we need to focus on. So you may want to pause here and start brainstorming how working class males and status frustration link to what you know about crime. So we've picked out these key terms, working class males, and the process that I want you to think about is who, what, and the criticisms that go with it. Now, your who is fairly obvious in this case. You need to talk about working class males. So if you apply cages, the two most obvious areas to look at are class and gender. And you're going to start off by looking at working class versus middle class. So your opening paragraph, once you've done your introduction, you should focus on the working class and middle class offending, views of crime, and types of crime. So then you think about what would different sociologists say? So if we start with functionalists, they might talk about anomie and working class males having less opportunity, so they turn to crime. And if you are confident there and you know that's Merton, you can add that in and talk about Merton and his functionalist perspective, and that will really help you hit the top grades. So already we're off to a flyer. We're looking at kind of hitting 4 marks here, because we can build on that further with delinquency and status through subcultures. So you can link that to status frustration, you can link that to working class males, and you can talk about Cohen. So if you develop both of those studies, you've linked it to class, you've linked it to status, you're going to get some marks at least here for the essay. Now, comparisons is really where people fall down. So the opposite view to functionalists, or the contrasting view really, maybe rather than opposite, would be Marxists, because they would talk about class too. And Marxists would say, well, middle class people commit white collar crime. It's just reported and treated differently. The crime which we see and hear of most is working class crime. White collar crime is harder to detect. It's more embarrassing for businesses who don't want to maybe draw attention to it. And social inequality creates crime anyway. A lot of these petty crimes happen because there's so much unfairness in society, and the working class, maybe they don't have the means or the opportunities to do anything else. So you can actually see some parallels here with Merton maybe, but the conclusions are very different. Suddenly you're writing at a much more sophisticated level. And to build on that, you've looked at who, you've looked at what would be the criticisms of this sociology that you've introduced? Well, the criticism of the functionalists might be that crime shouldn't be necessary if society was fairer. So you're building on the Marxist idea here, and not all behaviour offenders are labelled fairly, so there's discrimination in society. The fact that we're picking out working class males in the essay is kind of implicit labelling, isn't it? So what about other people? What about other ethnicities? You can draw on cages here, you can draw on age here, because you've looked at Cohen. And most crime isn't utilitarian, i.e. people stealing to survive. At least in our society, crimes happen for lots of various different reasons, and you may want to get into that. Could be personal choice, could be circumstance. And reported crime is likely to be things that are easily observed, like violence. So you're building on your white collar crime point from earlier. Now, if you've written all of that, chances are you're going to get over half marks, and it depends on how well you've done it. But remember to always evaluate each paragraph that you've written. And there you could have 2 or 3 paragraphs. So you want to bring it back to the idea of status, or at least status frustration. How do these points that you're making link to the status of these working class males, or the people you're comparing them with, in this case, middle class males? Now, to really unlock the top marks, or to ensure you improve what you've written so far, you can repeat the process. So if on the last slide you felt, well, I could probably write about half of that, that's okay, you're still going to get some marks. Or if you felt, well, that last slide was great, but it's not going to get me 12 out of 12, you're probably right. So repeat the process. Who else can we talk about? Well, we can look at gender. What about female offending? And what would different sociologists say? So we might want to build on functionalists and go back to what we've looked at before and include things like socialization. Women and girls are socialized differently to males. So bedroom culture and family expectations, that might stop women from committing as much crime. So it might be how your society is structured. And things like edge work, thrill-seeking, risky behaviour is still linked to masculinity. So vandalism and antisocial behaviour might still be seen as displaying masculine traits. Therefore, working class males are more likely to indulge in it or commit it. And then you could argue about whether or not you believe that's to do with status or their status as males. Sometimes in questions like this, I see people bring in Willis or studies from other parts of the GCSE. That's fine, but I wouldn't overly focus on something like that. Only use it to illustrate a point. And then you may want to look at feminist behaviour. So this could be your 3rd paragraph or your 3rd study, 3rd section, however you want to think of it. Feminists would look at bedroom culture and say it's just another form of patriarchy, it's controlling women, it's not fair. And double deviance is prevalent when women are convicted. So when a woman does get convicted, she's treated harshly, she's stereotyped, she's reported differently in the media. So those could be other ways that you could add to this essay. And if you've done every single thing that I've said by now, your essay is going to be overly long, I would think, and maybe not fit in to sort of the 12 to 15 minute mark. What I'm trying to show you is there's lots of opportunities here. You can go in different directions. And then if you criticize these studies and these ideas, you could talk about edge work being about age and opportunity rather than gender. So it's not really a relevant comparison. You could talk about the idea that females are capable of socializing, making poor choices too. Or that the chivalry thesis is a direct challenge to double deviance. So you may want to look at the PMS case and other examples in passing. That should help you come up with way more material when you're planning your essay out in the exam, because you could do a little flow chart at the top and then start writing this. You could think about where you want to go with this and what it means. But I hope when you get this essay question that you struggle with, whatever it might be on, you can think, well, who's it talking about? What would sociologists say? And what would different studies show us? And what are the criticisms of that? And that should get you going. And you apply that to cages, hopefully you'll have more than enough to write already. Now, if you're still not sure, or you're thinking, well, yeah, I could pick out some of those keywords, I could maybe pick out functionalist, feminist, Marxist, I may even be able to name one of them, but I'm not going to be able to do it in that much depth. Limit your negative mindset for a start and start thinking about what can you say? What do the official stats say? You know, if you've got a module like crime, education, family, there's official government statistics. So can you bring those in anywhere? Do they support a trend or a pattern which links to a study, either criticising that study or supporting it? You know, in terms of crime, what laws are there? In terms of the other modules, what acts are there? What legislation is there? So you can apply those to the issue, you can apply those to specific viewpoints or studies. That will help get you going, that will help get you some marks too. Also think about who's not mentioned. So again, coming back to cages, are the studies talking about female offending when it comes to a question like this? Are the studies talking about ethnic minorities? What does that tell us? And then the last thing you might want to ask is, have times changed? What's happening in terms of what's criminal now, what used to be criminal, what behaviour happens now, what used to happen, and how do the different classes identify themselves, how do different people identify themselves? A lot of these studies are written decades ago, so a lot will have changed since then. So that's always a good way when you're writing an essay to think about, what did it used to be like? What was society like when this person was writing? What's society like now? And that can help clarify thoughts as well. Another way to help you get marks is a conclusion. Even if you got as far as the first slide and you start to run out of time, you can write a conclusion. You can sum up the key issues and key ideas, and that gives the examiner something to look at and something to think about and show your understanding to them. So when you write a conclusion, think about, well, who have I talked about? What have I talked about? Which criticisms have I talked about? And then try and distill that into one clear idea. Overall, it is clear that working class crime is linked to status frustration. Working class crime isn't linked to status frustration, or it's more complicated than that, because, and then list your reasons. This shows us that if you can write that little paragraph at the end, or mini paragraph at the end, and show that you've understood most of what you've talked about, at least, that's going to help get you some marks. So if you're really feeling like, well, I can never get 12 out of 12, I'm not even sure I can get 6 out of 12 on many essays, hopefully by following this process, by doing this little mental flow chart in your head, or even sketching it out as you go, that will help you get more confident with your essay writing. That will help you understand the process more. And more often than not, I find many of you have way more knowledge than you appreciate, and getting it out there and getting it down on the page is the difficulty bit. So hopefully this process will help you. Give it a try, let me know what you think, and if you've got any suggestions, feel free to email me, leave it in the comments, find me on Google Classroom, and I'll try and adjust it or make some more videos for you.